Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Kevin Blekicki Show. This is episode 28. I am your host, Kevin Blekicki. We have a great show for you this week. We are going to be talking about week one of the NFL season. The NFL is back, baby. We're going to talk about week two of college football. We're going to get into the AP poll a little bit. And of course, we are going to talk about my New York Metropolitans who are crumbling before my very eyes yet again. But we start off with the NFL, specifically Steelers and Jets. This game was really the only game on the season that I really cared about whether the Jets won or lost because it was the return of Aaron Rodgers to New York. Now, we know the story of this. Aaron Rodgers had a whole circus around him. The Jets, being who they are, kind of let him just walk right all over him. We gave him everything that he wanted for what he wanted. He had a laundry list of things that he wanted. He got every single one of them. And of course, week one a few years ago, he comes down with an unfortunate Achilles injury, tries to come back, is unsuccessful in doing so. He tried to come back that season. It didn't work. So then we go into the 2024 season, kind of in a win now mode. All the chips are put forward, and it was a colossal disaster. The Jets went 5-12. Aaron Rodgers did pretty well. He had 28 touchdown passes, 11 interceptions, almost 4,000 yards, and completed over 60% of his passes. So he did his job. He was pretty good. It's just that the team around him failed him. So at the end of this season, or at the end of last season, Aaron Glenn is, named the new head coach. Of course, he has nothing to do with Aaron Rodgers. And him being the honorable man that he is, he calls him up and he tells him to fly to New York, and he has a conversation with him, and they end up parting ways. And Aaron Glenn says that he is no longer a part of the Jets' future, and they let him go. And he ends up going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And what makes this matchup even more entertaining and interesting is that Justin Fields went from the Steelers to the Jets. So it was essentially a trade, even though that they never really traded players. They both were free agents, but it was kind of a revenge game for both of them. And this was a scenario that I was kind of expecting to happen. I was expecting Aaron Rodgers to go into MetLife Stadium and prove why he's still a good quarterback, and he did that. He went in there, he scored 4 touchdowns, he looked pretty good. But I don't regret the Jets moving on from him. I think it was the right move. Best case scenario, the Jets get one more good year out of Aaron Rodgers, maybe two. If you're pushing it, he's an older quarterback. He's at a higher risk of injury, especially when you have that stupid MetLife turf. And going to Justin Fields and going younger, I think was the right move. Maybe Justin Fields is a stopgap quarterback, and maybe the Jets find their franchise quarterback in next year's draft. But I think that they ultimately made the right decision moving on from Aaron Rodgers, and he really took that to heart. And I would have been totally fine with this game just being a classic, you know, former player coming into your stadium for a team that you root for and getting a revenge game. I was planning on that. I predicted it. If you follow me on TikTok, I do my weekly NFL picks, and I predicted that the Steelers were going to go into MetLife Stadium and beat the Jets. I had a pretty good week this week. I went 12-4 on my picks. I did pretty good last year too, but I digress. And I fully expected Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers to go in there and get the win. And it was a close game, it was a back and forth game, it was very entertaining, it was a very good game, and, the Jets just made some mistakes in crunch time that cost them the game. Now these 2 teams are in 2 totally different trajectories. The Steelers are kind of in a win now mode, they're expected to make the playoffs, um, and, they have high expectations, they brought in a lot of veteran talent, like DK Metcalf, Jalen Ramsey, obviously Aaron Rodgers, and, they're expected to be a pretty good team this year, and the Jets, just got rid of Aaron Rodgers. They have Justin Fields as their quarterback. They have a lot of young talent in guys like Sauce Gardner that they locked up, Garrett Wilson that they locked up, Breece Hall, great young running back, Braylon Allen. Then on the defensive side, you got, Quinn and Quincy Williams. So this team has a lot of good young players, but they're not really expected to do a whole lot this year. So the fact that they were able to keep it close is definitely, a positive sign, but, it was a close, and Chris Boswell hit a 60-yard game-winning field goal, his career long, which of course he did. Justin Fields had a chance to run for the first down, and of course he throws it to Garrett Wilson. He gets lit up by Jalen Ramsey, and the game ends that way. So, it's an unfortunate loss. I'm not upset about the loss. I'm upset with the way that Aaron Rodgers handled it during the post-game press conference when he said that he enjoyed beating every single member of the New York Jets. Like I said, we gave him everything that he wanted. Nathaniel Hackett was the head coach of the Denver Broncos for 1 season. Actually, less than that. He was a head coach for less than 1 season, and he got fired because he was terrible. And what happens? Aaron Rodgers likes him. He's his friend. We bring him in. Okay, fine. Nepotism, whatever. We give him everything that he wants. He wants to play with his old buddy Devontae Adams. We do it. He wants to play with his old buddy Alan Lazard. We do it. He wants to play with his old buddy Randall Cobb. We do it. He wants to play with Billy Turner. We did it. We gave him every single player that he wanted. Aaron Rodgers stepped into one Jets drive and became the owner overnight. And this is how he repays. Like, he seemed to be really butthurt at the fact that Aaron Glenn, said to him face to face that he didn't want him to be a part of this team. But newsflash, that's what grown adults do. Grown adults have uncomfortable conversations with people, and they are able to deliver bad news to them. And Aaron Glenn is a real man who went to Aaron Rodgers face to face and said that you weren't the future of this team. And he has to just agree with that, and he has to move on. So I will be, from now on, number one hater of Aaron Rodgers because he is soft and whiny and annoying, and he did nothing for the Jets. And now he has a personal vendetta against us. So now I guess I have a personal vendetta against him. But now we transition into college football. It was quite the week for college football. Of course, you had USF going into Gainesville and knocking off Florida. You had Mississippi State at home knocking off a playoff team last year in Arizona State. But I'm here to talk about the AP poll because for the first time since I have become a fan of the South Carolina Gamecocks, we are actually ranked above Clemson. Now, Clemson had an absolutely disastrous game against Troy at home on Saturday. They ended up winning the game 27-16, which is not okay. And they were down 16-3 at home to Troy at halftime. So they fall from number 8 in the country all the way to number 12, which I think is still a little way too high. But South Carolina came into the game against South Carolina State, and they came in as the number 10 team in the country. They fall back a spot and they go to number 11. So right now they're 11 and Clemson is 12. And I've never would think to see the day where South Carolina is ranked above Clemson in college football. And I am one of those people who is an all sports fan for South Carolina. If South Carolina is in any type of athletic event, I'm rooting for them. And anytime that they beat Clemson in an athletic event, I'm happy. I don't care whether it's football, baseball, basketball, either men's or women's, equestrian, field hockey, whatever it is, I'm for South Carolina and against Clemson. So the fact that we are ranked above them, I think, is insane. I also am kind of perplexed with us being the number 11th ranked team in the country. Last week, I mentioned how tough the schedule for South Carolina is. And this season so far, they went up against a Virginia Tech team who is now 0-2. They only win 24-11, and they were only able to separate themselves from that team with the punt return by Vakari Swain and the long touchdown to Nick Harbor. And then the game against South Carolina State at home, it was kind of unfortunate circumstances. It was a lightning delay, almost 2.5 hours. The game didn't start until like 9:30 p.m. It didn't end till after midnight. South Carolina came out sloppy. They were actually down 3-0 to South Carolina State after the first quarter. Then eventually things started to turn. And speaking of Vakari Swain, he had 2 more punt return touchdowns. He now has 3 in 2 games. He might actually be the Heisman Trophy winner. Everyone's saying that Lenore Sellers is one of the Heisman Trophy candidates. It's looking like Vakari Swain is putting up a good case for himself. And this was just an underwhelming performance by South Carolina. So they've had 2 underwhelming performances, but they are 2-0. And this was just a week where a lot of teams just didn't look good. So maybe that has something to do with it. But like I said, they got Vanderbilt this week. And then, like I said, they go on the road to Missouri, top 25 matchup. Kentucky at home, they should win that. On the road at Death Valley against LSU, then boom, Oklahoma, who just beat Michigan. They're doing pretty well. Then Bama, then Ole Miss, then Texas A&M, and they close out the season against Clemson. So we're talking about a very difficult schedule. So I've always been kind of on the South Carolina and Lenore Sellers is a little bit overrated train, and if they're able to get through this stretch of games, they're as good as any team in the country, and they should be a playoff team, and they could even have a chance at competing for an SEC title, which is crazy. But they got to get through these games, and I'm not sure if they're going to do that based on the way that they've been playing in these first 2 matchups. And if we quickly go around the league, like I said, you got to give a huge shout out to USF for knocking off Florida, and I also have to give credit to a university that was close to me where I grew up. I grew up on Long Island. Shout out to the LIU Sharks for getting their first win against an FBS opponent against Eastern Michigan on the road. Shout out to the Sharks for getting the job done. But I'm just glad that we have college football back. We got college football. We got the NFL back, and the MLB playoff push is heating up. So it's really a great time to be a sports fan. And we are going to be back with more of the Kevin Blekicki Show after these messages. So stay tuned. We are back with more of the Kevin Blekicki Show. And it's just like ripping off a Band-Aid. We got to talk about the New York Mets. This has to be one of the most frustrating and agonizing teams I have ever had the displeasure of watching in my entire life. They make my eyes bleed. Um, I hate this team. I genuinely hate this team. I don't think I've ever hated a team that I've rooted for and have been a fan of more than I hate this team. Right now, they sit at 76 and 69. Nice. They are 9 games behind the Phillies for first place in the NL East. That division is over. We can put a fork in it. Congrats to the Phillies. You won the National League East. They are just a measly 2 games ahead of the Giants for the third and final wild card spot in the National League. This team at one point had the best record in baseball. They were over 20 games over 500, and they are at risk of missing the playoffs entirely. Now, if you've been listening to the Ryan show since before the MLB season started, I was a guest on one of his programs, and I said that the Mets were about like an 85 win team, and they were probably going to be like one of like a fringe wild card team. And I got a lot of flack from Mr. Ryan Vernell for saying that. And the reason behind that was I didn't think that the offense was going to be an issue. Obviously Juan Soto is amazing, a generational talent. Obviously Lindor is a perennial MVP candidate every year. I knew that Pete was going to mash. I had high expectations for Vientos after his postseason performance. I know Brett Beatty is a pretty solid Major League Baseball player. Jeff McNeil is serviceable. Brandon Nimmo is pretty good. I had a lot of expectations for Francisco Alvarez because I thought that the one thing that he lacked was plate discipline, and I thought that was really going to be improved with the addition of Juan Soto. He was really going to help him out with that. He's been kind of a mixed bag, but he's been pretty good this season. Did miss some time with some injury, and you have to give him credit for coming back after we thought that the season for him was over after that Little League Classic game where he slid headfirst into second base and he ended up having a UCL strain on his right thumb. We thought that the season was over. And then while he's on a rehab assignment, he hurts his left hand and he's still back 17 days after being on the injured list. So you got to give a huge shout out to Francisco Alvarez for thugging it out when he needs surgery. That will not be lost on this season. That will not be forgotten. But this team is infuriating because they refuse to play to their potential. Every time that they play up to their potential and you think that this team is going to do well and that they're clicking and they're going to turn a corner, they always crap the bed. It is like clockwork. Time is a circle for this New York Mets team. They are the most mid team that I've ever witnessed in my entire life. Every time that you think that they're good and they're going to figure things out, they crap the bed. And whenever you think that the season's over, all of a sudden they remember how to play baseball. And then once they remember how to play baseball, they forget how to play baseball. This is a team that has been back and forth, between being good and being bad for the last couple of months. They've been mediocre. At this point in time, they're just a mediocre baseball team. They have really high highs, but they also have some really low lows. So let's recap from the first day of the month, September 1st, my mother's birthday. Happy belated birthday, Mom. They win 10-8 again. They play the Tigers, the Detroit Tigers on the road. It's going to be a tough matchup. The Tigers have been one of the best teams in baseball all season. They win game 1 10-8. Then they win game 2 12-5. They score 22 runs in the first 2 games. For those of you doing the math at home, that is 11 runs per game. They are flying high. They are feeling good. Juan Soto hit his first career grand slam as a Met, which not only was his first career grand slam, but that was his first home run as a Met with more than one runner on base. I know the bar is in hell right now. But then they were due for a rough game. They lose 6-2 in game 3. All right, no problem. Then they have a huge series against the Reds where they have a chance. They go into the series with the Reds 4 games behind them, and they have a chance to really just bury them either, put them 5 games back by taking 2 out of 3, or just almost ending their playoff chances by sweeping them and putting them 7 games back. And what do? They win game 1 by the skin of their teeth. It was a one-run game in the bottom of the ninth. Edwin Diaz, as Edwin Diaz does, a typical Edwin Diaz performance, he loads the bases and then somehow gets the next 3 hitters out and gets the save, and then the Mets win game 1. And then things start to fall off the wheels as, Jonathan goes in his second MLB start, goes 6 innings, does give up 4 earned runs, but does strike out 6 batters, but also gives up 3 home runs. So kind of a mixed bag for him. The Mets lose game 2. All right, he's young. Let's regroup and go back on Sunday. Sunday, they had the misfortune of going up against Hunter Green, who is one of the best young pitchers in all of baseball, going up against Brandon Sproat. Brandon Sproat is finally in the major leagues. They finally have Nolan McLean, Jonah Tong, and Brandon Sproat all up in the major leagues in the same rotation at the same time. And his start wasn't terrible. He went 6 innings, gave up 3 earned runs, 4 walks, 7 strikeouts. He only gave up 3 hits. But in typical Mets fashion, the 3 runs that he gave up were just too much. He pitched well. The Mets only scored 2 runs. They lose a close game, 3-2. So that's a disappointing series. And now they have lost the season series to the Reds. So if the Reds are tied with the Mets at the end of the season, they make the playoffs because they have a better head-to-head record. And then the Philadelphia Phillies. The Mets, it looked like the Mets were, when the Mets swept them a few weeks ago, it looked like the Phillies were dead. And ever since then, they've been playing really well. And in game 1 of this series, it wasn't pretty by any standards. I was joking, the Mets gave up like 1 run, like early, like an RBI single to Nick Castellanos, like early on in the game. And I was joking in my Mets Twitter group chat. I'm like, oh, good game. Game is over. Aaron Nola, who's been terrible his last couple of starts and really for most of the season, I said, oh, he's going to go 7 shutout innings, and the Mets were going to lose after they gave up that 1 run. And I was pretty damn close to being right. They did end up losing 1 run after giving up a run in the second inning and then shutting out the Phillies for the rest of the game. But the Mets also got shut out themselves. And Aaron Nola didn't go 8 shutout innings like I predicted, but he did go 6 shutout innings with 7 strikeouts, 3 hits, and 2 walks. So I wasn't too far off on that. And then just game 2 happened. They just absolutely get shelled by Ranger Suarez. 6 shutout innings, and he struck out 12 batters. I know Ranger Suarez is good, but you can't let that happen. And of course, Sean Manaea. 5 innings, 4 earned runs, 5 strikeouts, 2 home runs, one of them being Kyle Schwarber's 50th of the season. And I'm just done with Sean Manaea. They sent down Kodai Senga to the minor leagues, and I think that they have to do the same with Sean Manaea or put him on the IL or something because he just doesn't have it. He looked really good in his first appearance when he came off the injured list against Kansas City in a relief duty. He looked really good then, but he doesn't have it. He can only go 4 or 5 innings, and those innings he'll rack up some strikeouts, but he'll give up like 4 or 5 runs, and by that time you're putting the offense behind the 8 ball immediately. So you're not gonna win many games that way. But I mean, this Mets team is incredibly frustrating to watch. And I'm at the point in this season where any any prediction that you have about them, like whatever happens with this Mets team, I will believe. If the Mets end up missing the playoffs, I can understand that. I can see a world where that happens. This pitching staff is too inconsistent. The bullpen sucks outside of Edwin Diaz, and as I mentioned, that Friday game against Cincinnati, he was able to tightrope his way out of danger, but he's very well capable of putting himself into danger where he has no margin for error. They're only going to go in as one of the hottest pitchers in baseball. Of course, he was an all-star this season, and so he had a great start to the season. He has not been as good in his last handful of starts. Hopefully, he's able to get back to his old self before the season is over and into the playoffs. But you never know. Sproat was pretty good in his debut. Jonah Tong, his first start, the Mets scored like 1,000,000 runs, so he didn't really have a whole lot of opportunity to really settle into that game because he was sitting for too much, and he wasn't too great in his second start, but I still believe he's gonna be really good, and Nolan McLean's been absolutely disgusting. Now, if the season ended today, the Mets would make the playoffs, and they would have to face the Dodgers in the wild card series. There's some good news and bad news with that. Bad news is that it would be on the road, and the Mets are not a good road baseball team this year. The good news is that it's only a 3-game series, and in those 3 games, you would be throwing out Nolan McLean, who the Dodgers have never seen, probably Jonah Tong, who they've never seen, and hopefully by that time he would be a lot better than he is now. And then either David Peterson, who's been one of their better pitchers and was an all-star this season, so you have at least some sort of faith in him, or Brandon Sproat, who did well in his first start. Um, and you only have to win 2 of those games. So, you don't have to worry about Manaea, you don't have to worry about maybe McGill coming back, you don't have to worry about, Senga's not in the rotation anymore. You're only gonna be putting your best pitchers out there, so you feel at least pretty good about that. And also, the Mets not only took the season series from the Dodgers, but the Mets were the better team in every single game that they played. They just, weren't able to get the job done and finish the job. But then, if they're able to make it through the wild card spot, they have to go against the Phillies. And I mean, on paper, the Mets are better than they were last year against the Phillies. I know they've dropped the first 2 games of this 4-game set on the road against Philly. They would not have home field advantage, which is obviously a bummer, but Mark Vientos seems to own them. Juan Soto, who everyone sucks, is going to have a 40 home run and 100 RBI season. He's already at 30-30. So he's going to have a 40-30 season and a 40-100 season. Pete Alonso already has 33 home runs and 113 RBIs. So he might, if he gets hot, he might even break his own career high in RBIs. You hope that Lindor can get back to his MVP self. I see a world where they could win that series as well. And then, you're talking about making it to the NLCS. And I think that any Mets fan right now would take up another trip to the NLCS. Back-to-back NLCS performances is nothing to scoff at. It's hard to win in baseball. And I definitely think that it's on the table. But I also think that this Mets team can miss the playoffs. Like I said, any result that happens is completely believable. This team could miss the playoffs. This team could win the World Series. Only time will tell what the real answer will be. But that does it for this edition of the Kevin Blekicki Show. If you want to follow me, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Kevin Blekicki. You can follow me on Twitter at KBlekicki. You can also follow me on TikTok at Kevin Blekicki. And make sure, if you're watching this on YouTube, you like this video, you subscribe, you hit the notification bell so you're always on. You always know when this show is going to be on. And we will come back with you next week with more of the Kevin Blekicki